Howdy folks, welcome to Module 4 of the CompTIA A course. Today's module, as you can see, is called Troubleshooting PC Hardware. And in case you're wondering, this version, the A course, is based on the 1200 series, guys. Now today's module consists of 3 main sections, and like usual, these 3 main sections, the titles doesn't tell us everything we need to know. So if you'd like a more accurate list of what's in today's module, you can find that in the video description down below with nice convenient timestamps. Now as for the 3 main sections today, folks, the first one we'll be diving into will be BIOS and UEFI. So we're going to be taking a bit of a dive through that. The second main section will be power and disk issues. So we're going to be looking at various hard drive and power related problems that one might experience, how to go about it, the steps you can go and take, that kinds of stuff. The third and the last main section we'll be covering in today's module, guys, is system and display issues. So clearly we're going to be dealing with a lot of issues today. Now folks, in case you guys don't know, at the end of this course, at the end of this playlist, there will be some practice questions as well, custom made practice questions, which are specifically designed to test your knowledge on what you've learned in this course. These custom practice questions, guys, they do test you on the same objectives and they measure you on the same skills as the actual exam. It's not the actual questions from the exam, but they test you on the same objectives and skills. At the end of the day, if you've covered the whole course, if you've watched all 22 modules, then you should be able to cover those questions and you should be able to go and sit for the actual exam. As a bonus, I will also include a video which will tell you what to do and what not to do in the exam. Things like arriving early, all kinds of things like that. There's obviously going to be a couple of things you know, and there's going to be a couple of things that you might not know. Right, folks, before we dive into that first main section, if you haven't done it already, give this video a like. It helps me and the channel when you do that. If you'd like to know when Module 5 goes live, maybe consider subscribing. Alright, let's go dive into that first section, folks. BIOS and UEFI. So it should come as no surprise that the first main topic we're going to be talking about in this section is, well, BIOS and UEFI. So I'm going to start you guys off with BIOS. So in case you didn't know, this is actually short for Basic Input Output System. In other words, BIOS. Now the BIOS, folks, this used to be used for many years. For a very long time, this used to be the only one you would find on motherboards. So up until about 2009, maybe give or take a couple of years, this was the only one you would find. So if you want to enter the BIOS, or the UEFI for that matter, you need to press the delete key or the F2 key, usually on the keyboard for most computers. It's not set in stone, it's just usually going to be the F2 or the delete key for most computers. So by repeatedly pressing that in the beginning when a computer is busy starting up, you will enter the BIOS or the UEFI. Now, as I said in the beginning, in the old days, we only had a BIOS. So for many, many years, that's the only one we used to use. And till this day, it's still used. It's just not used as much anymore. As you can see what I've written there. It's just not used as much anymore. Now, the BIOS, guys, you can only navigate this using a keyboard and your arrow keys. So it's not much you can see. It's normally a blue screen or a black screen. You've got to use your arrow keys to navigate. And in there, you would go and configure things like your system time, your boot order, if you want to go and overclock the machine. You can go and set your administrator or your BIOS password, which is the same thing effectively. So there's not a lot of reasons people would normally go in there. So one of the main reasons folks would normally go in here is normally to go and adjust their startup or boot order. Which device do you want your machine to go and look on first for something bootable? Normally your hard drive will be the default. Now in terms of the UEFI, so that, folks, is obviously short for something too. It is short for Unified Extensible Firmware Interface. Try saying that 5 times fast. Now that's obviously a much more up-to-date one, and pretty much most modern motherboards support that these days. So if you go buy yourself a new modern motherboard these days, that's the ones you're going to find on it. It's unlikely you'll still find a BIOS. We still call it the BIOS, but New motherboards these days, we normally use the UEFI. The UEFI's got a graphical interface. You can actually use your mouse. You can go and click on tiles or icons. You know, it's just so much more user-friendly. You can still do the same stuff as in the old days, but nowadays you can do so much more. Now, the UEFI, it supports 64-bit CPU operation as well. I mean, it should come as no surprise considering that everybody is using 64-bit these days. So at least it does support 64-bit CPU operation as well, folks. Alright, let's move you guys on to boot and device options. So one of the reasons why you'd want to go into your BIOS or UEFI, as I've said earlier, is to go and adjust your startup order. This, guys, is also called your boot option sequence. Your boot sequence. I just normally call it the boot startup order. So what happens is when your PC starts, in a matter of a couple of seconds or milliseconds or whatever, it's going to go and check where it needs to go and boot from. It's going to go and look for something bootable. And it's going to start by checking the order that you've specified. So the average machine would normally go and check on the hard drive first for something bootable. And usually it's going to find something, which is your operating system. Now, what you can go and do is you can go and specify other devices that it needs to go and look on first. This could be something like a USB device, potentially a flash drive, a memory stick in other words. This could potentially be an optical drive, which is not something we use nowadays anymore because, well, if you go check, most machines these days don't even have an optical drive anymore. It could be that you want this machine to go and check on a network for something bootable. So we especially do this when we're about to install an operating system for the first time, or if we want to go and wipe the hard drive and install a whole new operating system altogether. Now, you can't wipe the hard drive if the hard drive is currently in use. So you need to temporarily boot from someplace else. So that's where your boot sequence comes into play, folks. You are going to go into your BIOS or your UEFI. You're going to go and play with the boot sequence, and you're going to go and adjust it so that your machine no longer looks on the hard drive first. Instead, it's going to look on the hard drive as the second device or the third device. It's first going to go and look in your optical drive, or in your USB ports or whatever for something bootable. And if it finds something there, it's going to boot from that first, temporarily at least, and allow you to go and format your machine, wipe your hard drive in other words, and go and install a new fresh copy of your operating system. So in terms of options for startup or boot, the order you can go and choose, you can normally go and choose a fixed disk, which is your hard drive. So when it comes to hard drives, we can either go and say this is just a hard drive, which is the old mechanical hard drives, but we call this just a hard drive, or it could be a solid state drive. Now these days of the new funky new modern machines, this can also be a .m2 slot with one of those new funky hard drives, something you'll see a little bit more later in depth. You can also go and choose from an optical drive. I doubt you're going to have that option. I mean, you can probably go and choose it, but I suppose the real question here is, do you still have an optical drive? Most new machines these days, folks, don't actually have an optical drive anymore. You can go and choose USB, which is a very common method these days. That's generally how we install the operating system for most modern machines these days. So if you're doing this in your home environment or a small office environment, you're probably going to be using a USB to go and install the operating system. If this is for a medium to a large scale business, you're probably going to be installing the operating system remotely via the network. And you're probably going to be doing this for multiple machines at the same time. So we're normally going to go and use a network, or should I say PXE. Alright, so let me take you guys on to USB permissions. So in terms of USB permissions, guys, we actually have the ability to go into our BIOS or our UEFI, and we can actually go and block all USB devices or just certain types of USB devices. There's multiple places and multiple ways you can go and do this. Some companies will go do this in the registry, but that's not the topic here right now. The topic here right now is specifically the BIOS or the UEFI. What one can do there and what you cannot go and do there. Well, I suppose for the most part, what you can go and do there. So if you want to, you can go and turn USB off. So if people plug in USB devices into this machine, it will not pick them up at all, even though they're plugged into USB port. You can also go and configure it sometimes in such a way that it only blocks USB storage devices, like a flash drive or an external drive. But if you plug something in like a USB keyboard, a USB mouse, anything else, it should work just fine. But as soon as you try and plug in some sort of USB storage device, it blocks it. So some companies do that as a way of blocking their people from trying to steal information from the company. It's not the best way, in my opinion, so it's kind of silly, but yeah, some companies do still do that. So with regards to USB permissions, guys, we can say system firmware allows you, the administrator, to enable or disable controllers and adapters, including USB ports. So it's not limited to USB ports, but that's probably why you're going to go in there. So if need be, you can actually go and enable or disable a controller or two, an adapter or two, but the more likely one here, guys, is probably going to be the USB ports. You can also go and avoid security risks by giving control of USB permissions. If you really want to, you can go and do that too. Alright, let me take you guys through to fan considerations. Now, when it comes to fans, never mind physically plugging them in and all of that, you might need to consider a couple other things, like the settings in your BIOS or your UEFI. Now, depending on how you hooked up the fans in your computer case, guys, they might consistently run at maximum speed, or they might be adjustable in terms of speed. It all depends on how you connected them. Now, if you connected them correctly, which allows you to actually go and adjust the speed, or for the machine to go and adjust its own speed for the fan, that can actually be configured in the BIOS, guys. Now, before we talk about the BIOS, in terms of changing your fan settings, maintenance and care, guys, is very important. You need to make sure that the fans of your computer is always clean. It doesn't help you've got lots and lots of cool fans. You might also have RGB in your fans, if you know what RGB is. That's the fancy lights that you get these days that changes colors in the fan. Makes it look really, really cool, especially if you've got a gaming PC. So you might have all kinds of cool fans, lots of fans of RGB, but if they're blocked, it's not going to help you much, guys. You need to make sure the vents of those fans are clear, no dust. You need to make sure the fans themselves are clear, no dust. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is these fans are not really going to cool down as much as they're supposed to. They might run faster and faster, work harder and harder, but at the end of the day, it's not really achieving what it's supposed to simply because your vents are blocked. So clean the vents, guys. Regular dust cleaning, balanced airflow, and the position of fans is very important. So clean the fans. Make sure you position these fans correctly. It doesn't help you've got a lot of fans, but they all blow in the same direction. So in the front of the case, you'll normally find that fans will suck air in. And at the back of the case, air will normally be blown out. You can go and adjust this another way if you really want to, but just make sure that some fans are blowing out and some fans are sucking air in. It's just normally best practice to have fans suck in from the front and have the ones at the back, act as an exhaust which blows out hot air at the back. Anyway, getting back to the actual BIOS or UEFI side of things when it comes to fans, guys. So you can go and use your BIOS, or should I say system settings, to go and do things like balancing your fans, to go and adjust them to be cool or quiet, or you can go fanless completely if you really want to. It all depends on the fans you've got, how you connected them cable-wise, and where you connected them cable-wise. It depends on the motherboard you've got, and it depends on the settings you've chosen in the BIOS or the UEFI of that motherboard. All of that will dictate whether your fans are balanced. That means they will automatically speed up if they need to. And if the machine sees you've got minimal load, the fans will obviously slow down. If it sees you doing something heavy, like opening a game, the fans will start speeding up to start cooling the machine down because the machine's obviously going to work harder now, is it not? Now, guys, there is two ways one can go about monitoring the temperature of your machine. There's usually sensors built in all over your machine, by the way. Even the old machines that's low spec, even they have sensors built into them. So you can go and do this manually, via the BIOS or the UEFI. So if you go in there, you can go and monitor the temperature. How accurately you can see it and how nicely you can see it will depend on what kind of motherboard this is, the make, the model, and how old it is, of course. Another way you can go about doing this, guys, is third party, by using those sensors that go and collect data. So there is third-party software you can go and use. You don't always have to go into the BIOS. Sometimes, if you go and run third-party software, you'll find that these softwares are able to, kind of integrate with those sensors you've got on your motherboard. And they will also tell you the speed of your fans, the temperature of your CPU, and everything else. The temperature of your graphics card, temperature of your hard drive. So there's lots of tools you can go and use to go and do that for you. And a lot of them are actually free, mind you. They don't always cost you money. So if you're curious what some of these tools are, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. Alternatively, you can join my Discord server. That link is also in the video description down below. You can go and join there. You can go and ask there somebody in the community. Either myself or somebody will answer you. Or just ask in the comment section down below and I'll answer you as soon as I possibly can. Alright, let's move on to boot passwords and secure boot. Now, when we say boot passwords, guys, we're not just referring to the password one would go and type in when you start your machine. That is your Windows password. sometimes referred to as your logon password. Now, believe it or not, in case you didn't know it, there's actually in fact other passwords you sometimes need to type in before you even get to that Windows logon password page. Yeah. So there's two main boot passwords you get, guys. You get your supervisor password, which is sometimes referred to as an administrator password. Sometimes it's called a setup password, or sometimes it's called a BIOS password. Most people know this is your BIOS password. I think the second most common name it's got is the supervisor password. But it's also referred to as an administrator password or a setup password for the actual machine itself. So if you'd like to go into the BIOS of the machine, to go and adjust the startup order perhaps, you need to have the supervisor password. It's not exactly the same as the BitLocker passwords and stuff, which you need to go and type in before Windows starts, but it is still kind of sort of before Windows starts. So if you'd like to go into the BIOS, this is something you're going to see before you even get to the Windows Start on screen. And if you want to go and change the startup order of your machine, you'll have to know the supervisor password. So what does it do? Well, I think you guys can guess what it does, since I kind of just said. It restricts access to the system's BIOS or UEFI setup program. So if you don't want other people to go and tamper with your settings, to go and change the boot order of your machine, you can go and put a supervisor password. Now folks, in case you're wondering, there is ways to go and bypass this. I've seen so many people in my life come to me saying, I bought this second-hand PC, it's got a supervisor password or a BIOS password, and I can't go and reinstall Windows now because I can't go and change the boot order. I need to change the boot order so I can go and reinstall Windows on this new machine I just bought. But I can't because I don't know the BIOS or the supervisor password. Now, there is a way you can go and bypass that, guys, and it's totally legitimate. If you go to your machine, this is obviously easier on a desktop PC versus a laptop, but if you go to your computer and you remove that coin cell battery, which we explained previously in this course, I think it was in module 1 or module 2. If you remove that coin cell battery, which I showed you guys on the motherboard, that will make the machine forget the BIOS password. Now, don't just remove it. Leave it out for about 5 minutes. So if you leave it out for about 5 minutes, then it will forget the BIOS password. Unfortunately, it'll also forget the date and the time, and it's also going to forget the boot order. So once you put that battery back in, you might want to go and change the boot order, and you might want to go and update the date and the time again, because it's going to have no cooking clue what the date and the time is. It would have forgotten all the settings. You're basically doing like a hard reset. That is one sure way to go and reset the BIOS password if you've locked yourself out, or if you've got a second-hand machine that you are taking over from somebody. Another password you get, which is a main password, folks, is the user or the system password. That's, of course, your good old-fashioned Windows password. That one locks the system until authentication is provided. Authentication is, of course, to prove you are who you claim to be, that you are the owner to this device, or that you are the owner to this account. Something else I can mention here, guys, is secure boot. So we've spoken about, boot passwords, but what about secure boot? Secure boot, folks, is a UEFI feature that ensures that only trusted, digitally signed boot loaders are used. Now you have got a better idea, hopefully, what secure boot actually is. Alright, folks, and then the last topic for this specific section, and then we'll move on to the next section, is trusted platform modules. Normally, we call these just TPM for short. Now, if you don't know what this is, it's an actual chip on the motherboard of your computer, guys. Not all motherboards come out of this, and normally if they do come out of this, you're going to be paying extra. Its purpose is to go and do things like encryption, store encryption keys and certificates, cryptographic hashes, all kinds of things like that. Does lots and lots of things. Now, many moons ago, most motherboards did not have this, and if you wanted this, you would have probably had to go and pay an arm and a leg to be able to afford it. Nowadays, you'll find most motherboards come out of a TPM. Not all of them yet, but most motherboards. So the TPM, in short, guys, is an encryption product that scrambles data to only be decrypted using the correct key. You'll find that things like BitLocker normally makes use of the TPM, and in case you didn't know, you do get different versions of a TPM. Most new modern things like BitLocker and all that will probably want to make use of TPM version 2.0, but you do get other versions as well. Now, folks, in terms of TPM, just to reiterate what I said earlier, repeat myself, it stores digital certificates, cryptographic keys, and hashed passwords. It allows you to go and do encryption for things like BitLocker. So if you, your company, or your client's company would like to go and make use of something like BitLocker to go and encrypt a whole hard drive or a whole flash drive, a TPM is normally what is needed. It's not set in stone. There's other ways around it nowadays. You can also go and make use of group policies, which is not a topic right now, but usually a TPM is the way of choice. And then the last thing, folks, I'll mention here under TPM is hardware security module. Now, if you don't know what this is all about, this, folks, is a removable USB thumb drive that stores cryptographic keys. Sounds like something straight from a sci-fi hacker movie, doesn't it? Alright, folks, let's move on to the second main section in this module, power and disk issues. So we're going to be looking at different kinds of power-related problems that one might experience, what can be done to resolve that, what the symptoms might be. And the same can be said about hard drives, the different kinds of hard drive problems we might encounter, the symptoms, and what we could possibly do to hopefully resolve those issues. Alright, so the first topic up in this section, guys, I'm going to start you guys off with troubleshooting power issues. Alright, guys, let's start by talking about no power symptoms. Now, just because you've got symptoms of no power does not necessarily mean something is actually broken. It could very well just be a case of something is just loose, something might just be turned off somewhere, plugged out somewhere. It's not always a case of something is actually broken. At least we hope it's not something broken. Now, some of the symptoms of possible no power, guys, is no indicator lights. So what that means is when you press the power button in the front of the computer case, assuming this is a desktop case, usually there will be some sort of lights that come on the front. Now, I'm not saying the kind of lights you would see in a gaming case, all of that RGBs, although that's also a very clear indicator that something might be broken. But if you look at something like a normal office PC, they normally have very minimal lights. It's literally just a power button that might light up and one or two other small lights. So if you see no lights, that could be that something is broken. It doesn't mean that it is. If you guys remember from one of the previous modules, you would remember that the lights in the front has got a little cable that you need to go and connect to the motherboard. A little jumper cable. We call that a front panel connector. It's got 2 pins on the motherboard you need to go and plug it into. Now, if you do not go and plug that in, if somebody goes and presses the power button, the lights in the front of the case will not come on. So, yeah, it could honestly just be a matter of you or somebody has not plugged in that little connector, or maybe it came loose. It's very unlikely that that connector will come loose, but it's also still possible. So just because the lights don't come on, guys, does not necessarily indicate that there's a problem. But if you don't see lights and something else, a combination of symptoms, if you will, yes, that could be an indication that something is now broken. For example, if the fans don't start. Now, if it's just one fan, folks, don't panic. It could just be that that one fan is not plugged in. Once again, maybe it's obstructed by dust or something. But if all the fans don't come on, that is pretty bad. And that's pretty definitive that something is wrong. Something funky is going on here. So no lights and no fans. That could be a very sure sign that something is funky going on this PC. And it's probably power related then. Now, here's a list of possible causes for you guys. So I'm going to give you guys here a bit of a list of possible causes. Keeping in mind, the list I'm giving you is not everything that could be wrong. It's just some of the most likely things that could be wrong. If I had to give you a real accurate list of everything that could be possibly wrong in just this one scenario, we would never finish this module. That is how long the list actually is. So at the end of the day, guys, it's going to come down to a lot of experience. You will gain experience in the field, and that will allow you to know what to start with and what is the more likely culprit. But if you're just going to go and blindly scan for things that could be a problem, you would probably never finish because the list is almost infinite. Anyway, getting to possible causes, folks, this could be a circuit fault or a power blackout. So maybe that part of the building, your house or the office, maybe there's a fault on that circuit. So you might want to move that machine to a different circuit in the building, a different circuit on the DB board. Alternatively, it could be a power blackout. Maybe the whole building is experiencing a blackout, or maybe the whole region, the whole area where you're in is experiencing a blackout. Now, my country, blackouts are quite common, but in other countries, maybe not so much. So here, it's actually very likely in my country that this might just be a power blackout, and you just might not know it. So a good thing to start with would probably be to go and check if everything else is also not working. And if everything is, well, dead in the building, all the other computers and machines, then you know, okay, well, probably a power blackout. Something else that could also be a possible cause, which is very rare and very unlikely, but I have myself actually even experienced this, a socket fault. So the wall outlet in which you're plugging this machine, this desktop machine or whatever it might be, it could be that the socket itself is faulty. This happened to me once. I was actually fixing a printer for a printer company. They had lots and lots of big printers, and they print stuff for the public. And I was testing this one printer, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. I was about to strip this printer apart, and at that point in time, the store started getting very busy, and this printer was like in the middle of the store in the front. So I thought to myself, okay, you know what, let me unplug this and move it to the back of the printer where I'm out of the way, where I can go and test it, you know, without being in anybody else's way. So I moved this big printer, and I plugged it into a different socket, and guess what? It came on, and I thought to myself, okay, what changed? And it turns out that socket was faulty. Even if you turn it on, if you go check by the DB, the circuit breaker, it is on. So the socket was just faulty for some apparent reason. So that was up to them and an electrician to go and figure out why that might be. Other possible causes, folks, is switches and cables or connectors. It could be that some sort of switch somewhere is turned off. So this could possibly be the switch on the back of the power supply. Most power supplies these days have got a switch at the back. You'd remember we discussed that in one of our previous modules. I showed you guys pictures of power supplies, and I showed you what that switch looks like. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to have to go look at those previous modules as well, guys, because that is something they might ask you in the exam. So there is a switch at the back of the power supply. A lot of people tend to accidentally bump that switch when they move in their PC, unplugging the cables or plugging cables in. So they hold on to the back of the case, not realizing that they're actually bumping this little switch and turning the PC actually off. It could be that the switch by the wall is off, although that's the less likely one because normally you can see that one is off. It's the one behind the computer on the power supply that's the culprit. It could just be that some sort of cable is loose or some sort of connector. I would start at the one that plugs directly into your power supply. That's that kettle cord is what we call it, the main one that comes from the wall. If that does not seem to be a problem, you can also go and open the case, check if there's any other connectors that might possibly be loose or cables that might be loose, but it's very unlikely it'll be inside the case. Then, folks, a fourth one, and the last one I'll mention for you guys on the possible causes, is overloaded and faulty devices. It could just be that your machine is overloaded. So what happens is sometimes our users will go and install additional hardware. This could be additional fans, extra lights, maybe a new fancy graphics card. And sometimes these components draw so much power to the point where the power supply can't cope with the load. It's just being overloaded. It's drawing too much watts. So sometimes you might get lucky, the machine might actually start, but it won't start completely. As it starts up, the PC will just start shutting down again, almost like it's overheating. Other times you might find it'll actually start up, but as soon as you start using maybe your graphics card, putting some load on it, the PC will just shut down on you. It's not necessarily because it's overheating, guys. It's because now the graphics card's actually starting to draw some more power, and the power supply is not big enough to cope with the load. So you need a bigger power supply that's got more watts. Now, something you can go and do to go and test if this is a problem is to go and do something called power supply testing. There's multiple ways you can go and test the power supply. That is the quickest way to go and check if there's a power issue on a machine. You could go and take another power supply that you know for a fact is working. That's normally what most of us will go and do because very rarely do we actually have a proper power supply tester. So you get these actual tools you can go and plug into the power supply, and it will allow you to test if this power supply is still in a good working condition. But unfortunately, very rarely do we actually have access to one of these tools. The companies don't normally buy us the tools we need. Instead, they expect us to usually pull a rabbit out of a hat, go abracadabra, and you must just magically diagnose what's wrong with this PC. So if you don't have a power supply tester, which is the more likely scenario, folks, what you can go and do is take a known working power supply, maybe a new one or one from another machine that you know for a fact is working, unplug the one that you suspect is faulty, plug the other one in, and check if the machine comes on. If it comes on, well, then you know the one you just unplugged is a faulty power supply. If it does not come on, then you know, okay, well, it's not the power supply, or at the very least, not just the power supply. Might be the power supply along with something else. Now, in terms of steps to diagnose the problem, guys, there's quite a few things we can go and do, and I did actually mention quite a few of them already. You can start off by checking the front panel LED lights, so in the front of the case. If this is a normal office PC, there's bound to be at least one or two lights that's supposed to come on when you press the power button. So if you don't see any lights come on, that could be an indication that there's a power supply problem. Doesn't mean it is. Like I said, it could just be that the wire is unplugged. I mean, I, for one, sometimes don't even plug that wire in because, well, why should I? It's my own PC. I can do what I want. Other things you can go and check is something we did mention earlier. Check if the fan starts spinning. If it's just one fan you see that's not spinning, it does not necessarily mean it's a power supply problem. But if all of them don't spin, that is a problem. So that is definitely something you should go and check out, and it could be possibly the power supply. Go and check the wall socket, guys. So maybe move this machine to a different wall socket. Or get another device that you know for a fact is working. It does not have to be a PC. Plug that other device into that wall socket and check if it comes on. If it does, then you know, okay, well, the wall socket is confirmed to work. What you can go and do as well, this is something smaller, is verify your power supply unit connections. So never mind that big kettle cord that plugs into the back of the power supply from the outside world, from the wall socket, so to speak. Open the case and check the wiring inside the case. It's very unlikely, but it does happen where some of these cables sometimes come loose, guys. It could just be that maybe a cable that's supposed to plug into your hard drive or a cable that's supposed to plug into the motherboard has come loose. Or maybe it was just never plugged in properly to begin with. You never know. Anything is possible, folks. What you can also go and do, which is also very unlikely to be, is to try another power cable. I mean the actual cable that plugs into the power supply, guys. The kettle cord that plugs into the wall socket, and then from there it plugs into your power supply. Try another one. It's very unlikely to be the culprit, but at the end of the day, if you start running out of options, then what else do you have to try? You know, it's not like you've got anything to lose at this point in time. You can also try disconnecting extra devices. So if this is not a machine that belongs to you, it could be that this user has added or installed new extra devices that you might not know about. You might not be aware of them. And by unplugging some of these random devices, you might come to the conclusion, you know what? This machine was simply just drawing too much power. So start by unplugging things that don't necessarily need to be plugged in. Something that's not a necessity. Unplug the extra fans, unplug the extra hard drives, things like that, and see if that makes a difference and if this machine actually starts after that. Lastly, folks, test the power supply. Something I've mentioned before. How you test it, that's up to you. I mean, the quickest and the best and the easiest way will probably be to use an actual power supply tester, which I find unlikely that you will have. So if you do have one, use that. If you don't have one, take another power supply that you know for a fact is working and check if that fires the machine up. Then at least you can rule out the power supply and check if it is that or not. Alright, folks, moving on to the second topic in this section. Troubleshooting post issues. Now you'll see there it's in capital letters, P-O-S-T. It stands for Power On Self-Test. Post. Now what the cheese is that? Now guys, this is something that takes place on all machines. Servers, desktops, laptops. You just don't always realize it because you don't always hear it per se. So I think the place where you probably would have most likely heard this is on a desktop PC. So the next time you press the power button on a desktop PC, listen very closely. As the machine starts up, literally in that first 1 or 2 or 3 seconds, you'll hear one short beep in most cases. That is the post process. So that's the power on self-test where the machine checks if everything is in a good working order. So you can imagine this as yourself standing there with a clipboard and a pen, checking if everybody's present and if everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. And when I say everybody, I mean the actual hardware components. So as you press the power button, in a fraction of a second or so, your machine checks if various components are present in the machine and if they are in a good working condition. This will be things like the CPU. It's going to say, hey, CPU, are you there, buddy? The CPU is going to say, yes, present. I'm in a good working condition. And then you're going to say, okay, hey, RAM, are you there? And the RAM's going to say, yes, I'm here, present. I'm in a good working condition. And so the list will go on. Now, there's certain things the post process does not check. And that is things like the power supply. It's things like the actual motherboard itself. Now, what do I mean by that, you ask? Well, guys, if there is a problem where something does not check out, let's just say something is not in a working condition or something is missing, what will happen is you will hear what we call a BIOS beeping code. Your machine will start beeping at you. Instead of just that one short beep that you heard, you would hear lots of other beeps. Maybe one long, continuous beep, or maybe lots of short beeps, or multiple long beeps. These are codes. Now, what all machines have in common is one short beep normally means everything is in a good working condition. But when something is faulty or wrong, they don't all have the same BIOS beeping code. Unfortunately not. So in my machine, for instance, one long beep might mean the RAM is loose or there's something wrong with the RAM. In your machine, one long beep might mean something is wrong with your CPU. It's not the same. So if you're not sure what's wrong, you can obviously go to a search engine of your choice, something like Google, and you can go type in the make and the model of your motherboard, and there they will tell you what that beep code normally means. Now, besides going to a search engine, it's usually quicker just to open a computer case. I mean, you can go and run a search for it if you guys really want to, but generally you will find in most machines, maybe not all of them, but in most machines, it's quicker and easier just to slide open a computer case and to have a peek inside. Usually you can actually see the problem. So you might see, oh shucks guys, the one RAM chip looks like it's not seated properly. Let me just go and seat it properly. And you'll tend to find that that's going to solve your problem. Or you might see, oh shucks guys, one of the cables looks like it's loose. So there is a chance that you might actually spot the problem. In the event that you don't spot the problem, try reseating certain components like the RAM chips. If you've got a graphics card, take it out, put it back in. If you've got a hard drive in your M.2 slot, maybe go and take it out, put it back in that chip. That kinds of stuff. Maybe take some of the cables out, your hard drive cables, power cables, unplug them, plug them all back in. And you might be surprised to where the machine might actually start after that. You never know. You've got nothing to lose, you've got something to gain. So now you guys have got a better idea of what the post process actually is. It's supposed to give you one short beep, but if you hear no one short beep and you get a different kind of beep, it normally indicates that something is wrong. So you might probably get a black screen, you probably will. So it could be that it's a failed firmware update. It could be, it's one of the least likely ones in my personal opinion, but this is what's listed in the course. So it could be, I'm not disagreeing of that. So if you had a firmware update or a BIOS update or something that failed, it could be that. Very unlikely, but it could be. It could be a faulty cable, connector or device. Now folks, that's the more likely one on this list. It could probably be some sort of device or connector, something is just loose. We know what the beep codes are. We call them BIOS beeping codes, even though a lot of motherboards don't really use BIOS anymore. Nowadays, it's more common for us to start using UEFIs, as we said earlier. Now, in terms of troubleshooting steps, folks, what can be done to diagnose this? Now, I've already kind of given you guys a lot of tips. I told you guys you can go to a search engine of your choice and type in the make and the model of your motherboard, followed by the code, and usually there it will tell you what this could probably be. It'll tell you this is an indicator of a RAM-related issue. Now, you might not spot the problem immediately if you know it's RAM, but at least you know where to go and start digging. Alternatively, slide the machine open, folks, and check if you can't visually see something. If you still don't visually see something, go and unplug and unseat everything and replug everything in and reseat everything. So, yeah. Anyway, guys, ask yourself or ask the user what has changed. So, since the last time this machine was running, since it was actually able to start, has anything changed? Has anything been installed physically, digitally? Has anything been plugged in, plugged out? Has the machine maybe been moved? What has changed since the last time this machine was working? If that does not help you, then maybe just go check your cabling and connections, as we've mentioned before. Go check for any faulty interfaces or devices. Go check for possible faulty parts, such as your CPU, RAM, graphics card. And the only way to really know if they're faulty is to go and take them out and put it into a different machine, or to put a known working one in your machine. So that's one of the things you're going to probably check last, because it's quite an inconvenient process to go and do that. And then, folks, the last thing I want to mention here before we move on to the next topic is if you receive no beeping code, let's say your machine does not start, obviously you're going to expect some sort of BIOS beeping code. Usually you'll get one short beep code, which means it's all working. If it's not working, you'll get some sort of code. But what if you get no beep? And what if you get no other code either? What does that mean? It could mean a lot of things, guys, but usually the culprits would be a faulty power supply or a faulty motherboard. The speaker, folks, that generates that beep is located on the motherboard. Now, if you've got a faulty power supply, it gives the power to your motherboard. Now, if your motherboard is not able to receive power from the power supply, then it's not going to be able to, well, give you that beep. So a faulty power supply will not give you a beep. If the motherboard itself is faulty, there's also a very good chance you might not get a beep, because the motherboard is the component that needs to give you the beep to begin with. So it goes without saying, if this motherboard is the culprit, then, well, guys, you're not going to get a beep, are you? Alright, let's move on to troubleshooting boot issues. Man, we are talking about a lot of troubleshooting in this module, aren't we, guys? So after post, by now you would know what post is. So after post, the system, guys, searches for boot devices in the order of the boot sequence. So earlier in this video, we spoke about the boot sequence. That is something that you would go and configure in your BIOS or your UEFI. It's effectively the order in which your machine is going to go and search for a device that it can boot from. Something that's got an operating system on it. Usually, the first device of choice will be your hard drive, but it's not always the case. So after your machine has done a post, hopefully you get one short beep. It's going to go and check the boot sequence. What is the first device that you specified that you want your machine to go and look for an operating system on? It's 10 to 1 going to be the hard drive. It's probably going to find it there, and then the machine will start. Now, if this does not happen the way I've just explained, let's say you're experiencing hard drive issues. The hard drive is maybe giving you an error, or the machine itself is giving an error where it says no boot device detected. That is something you never want to detect. Ironically, I think just a couple of days ago, less than a week ago, my son's one laptop did that. He started his laptop, he plays games on it, and as he started his laptop this one evening or so, he got a black screen that said no boot device detected. I was like, uh-oh, I already know what that means. Usually that means your hard drive has failed or crashed. It kicked the bucket. It's not set in stone. It could just be that one of the wires for his hard drive got loose, which is very unlikely for a laptop. It could be that maybe there's some sort of other issue. Maybe the device was not turned on in the BIOS, but why would it not be turned on if it was turned on this whole time? Unless the child managed to get into the BIOS and fiddle with something they were not supposed to and turn it off. Maybe they rearranged the hard drive order, which will be very unlikely considering it's a laptop. There's only one hard drive, so yeah. Anyway, guys, so when it comes to steps, if the fixed hard drive is not detected, a couple of steps that you or the user can go and take, besides the ones I've just mentioned maybe. Check that the hard drive, guys, is powered. Now, this is quite difficult with laptops, and you'll find of a lot of desktop PCs even these days this is difficult. So this is only possible of some of the old office PCs where they've got a little light in the front of the case. Usually this will be green or it will be orange. And if the hard drive is active, this little light will start flickering. The more active it is, or the longer it stays on, the more active the hard drive is. Now, not all machines comes out of this little light, and even if you do have it, just because it's dead, the light does not mean the hard drive is unplugged or dead. It could just be that somebody did not plug in the little light on your motherboard. That's also one of the little wires you need to go and plug in on the motherboard. It's also one of those little front panel connectors we spoke of. So if that doesn't work out for you, which it probably will, you're probably not going to manage with that one, guys. You can alternatively go and inspect the data and power connections. So open the computer case, check if the power and the data connectors are connected. So check on the hard drive. Check if your SATA cable is connected. Check if the power cable is connected. Check the other end of that SATA cable. Check if it's plugged into the motherboard properly. Check if you visually see anything else wrong on this computer. If that does not work for you, confirm that the drive is enabled in the BIOS or UEFI, like I said earlier. Now, personally, I find it very unlikely that'll be the issue unless this is a brand spanking new machine you've just built or you've just installed a hard drive. But if this was a machine that was up and running and there was no issues with it, it's extremely, extremely unlikely that this will be the issue where it's in the BIOS now been disabled. It's very unlikely, guys. But if it's a new computer you've just built, or if it's a new hard drive you've just installed, anything funky, some major change like that, yes, go check in the BIOS of the UEFI. There is a slim chance that it might just not be enabled. It could also be that maybe the boot sequence is incorrect. And I don't mean necessarily the boot sequence in a sense of which type of device it needs to go and look on first. I mean the boot sequence in the sense of which hard drive your machine needs to go and look on. So many moons ago, when we still used PATA drives, or IDE drives as some folks call it, we had the ability to go and use what we call jumpers. Jumpers is a little thingy you had to go and put in the back of the hard drive to choose which hard drive is your main one and which hard drives was your secondary hard drives. Now, of all the new SATA hard drives we have these days, that's not how it works. Instead, if you have multiple hard drives in your machine, I mean, never mind considering yourself blessed, but if you have multiple hard drives in your machine, guys, you need to go and choose in your BIOS or UEFI which one of those hard drives is your main one. Which one is the one you're going to be booting from. It could very well be that the hard drive that it currently is trying to boot from is not the one that's got your operating system installed. Maybe you're trying to boot from hard drive B, but your operating system is installed on hard drive A. So you need to go into your BIOS or UEFI and choose hard drive A as the bootable hard drive. So it could be that that's just the case, especially if you installed secondary hard drives recently. It's going to go and mess with your boot order in a sense of hard drives. You might have to go and readjust or rearrange the order, if you will. Now, since we're talking about order here, guys, obviously go check your normal boot sequence as well. I'm not talking about the hard drive sequence now. I'm just talking about your normal boot sequence for what kind of device, in the sense of optical drive, network, flash drive. So just check your normal boot sequence as well. It can't hurt to go and check that. You never know. And then, guys, this might not be applicable to all of you guys, but also go and ensure the M.2 or NVMe drives are seated properly. That's something I showed you guys in a previous video. So instead of having the old mechanical hard drives or the SATA hard drives that you'll go and plug into a cable, you get these new M.2 slots on the motherboard. It's a little chip that you go and plug in physically on the motherboard. I showed you guys earlier in a previous module, a video in fact, of where mine is on my PC. It's usually located underneath a heatsink, so you may or may not have to go and remove a small little heatsink. And underneath that heatsink, you've got the ability to go and slide in an NVMe drive, which is much, much faster than most other kinds of drives. These are generally the fastest kind of drives you'll find, so all the new current gamers at this day and age will probably go and use those drives because they give you the fastest speed. Right, folks, and then operating system errors and crash screens. So if you get those, I mean, that's never good. So it could be that it's a hardware fault. It could be that it's an operating system, software, or driver fault. Sometimes it's next to impossible to know what the problem is. Sometimes you will because of other symptoms. If it's just one symptom, it's quite difficult to diagnose. But if you have 2 or 3 symptoms, it makes it so much easier to know what it could possibly be and to know where to possibly start troubleshooting. It's the same when you go to your doctor. So if you're sick and you go to your doctor and you literally just mention one symptom, you're making it very difficult for the doctor to try and diagnose what's wrong with you. But if you go to the doctor and you mention multiple symptoms, the doctor can actually get a better idea of what might possibly be wrong with you. They might have a much better idea of what might possibly be wrong with you because of you mentioning multiple symptoms. And it's the combination of those unique symptoms that gives them that idea. They'll see, okay, that combination sounds like COVID-19. Or that combination sounds like normal flu. Or it sounds like this, or it sounds like that. It doesn't mean that is the problem. It doesn't mean that's what's wrong with you. But it gives them a good place to start with. And the same can be said about computers. So if you have multiple symptoms, hardware or software-wise, that's going to make it so much easier in a sense of guessing what might be wrong and to start troubleshooting. But if you only have one symptom, or none for that matter, yeah, guys, that's very difficult to diagnose. The list is infinitely long of what it could possibly be. So you're literally going to have to start from scratch and just check flipping everything. And let's face it, nobody wants to do that. Anyway, so still on the topic of operating systems and crash screens. So let's talk about troubleshooting operating system errors and crash screens, since we're on the topic anyway. So one of the biggest errors one might experience, guys, and nobody wants to experience this, is a blue screen of death. Better known as BSOD for short. So it's got multiple names. We call this blue screen of death. It's called a memory dump. It's called a stop error. It goes by many names. Now, why is it called a blue screen of death though? Because when you get this error, guys, it's normally a blue screen that's going to flash on your screen. And it's only going to be flashing for like a fraction of a second. And then boom, the PC restarts. It's normally so darn gosh quick. You don't have time to read the error. You don't have time to take a photo of the error. So how do you troubleshoot something that you can't even read or take a photo of? Makes it very difficult, right? Now, something you guys can go and do, which is not really part of the troubleshooting steps here. We're going to talk about troubleshooting steps next, guys. Is you can go into Event Viewer. It's a tool built into all client operating systems as well as all server operating systems. And in there, if you go to the System section, there's a section called System Logs. if you go check in the system logs, one of the type of logs you will see there is errors. And what you will see there is that blue screen of death. So if you know when that blue screen of death happened, let's say it was literally just 1 minute ago, just go check the logs for 1 minute ago. And there you will find you can go and read what the error was. Anyway, guys, so in terms of troubleshooting errors and crash screens, something you can go and try, and good luck trying this with a blue screen of death because it doesn't work, is to use a camera to scan the QR code on the screen. Now, unfortunately, specifically of blue screens of death, guys, these have got this nasty habit of usually flashing on the screen for like a fraction of a second. And like I said, it's so quick, you can't read it, you can't even take a photo of it, let alone scan some sort of QR code. Now, if you manage to do that, well, bravo to you, because normally that's quite difficult. So usually the QR code thing is something you're going to be able to do with other errors, but not so much of a blue screen of death. Alternatively, folks, what you can also try, if the QR code thing does not work out, which is probably going to be the case, you can use the first hex value from the event log to find more information. Yes, if you didn't know that, you can actually go and use the first hex value from the event log, folks, to go and check for more information. Lastly, before we move on, analyze the memory dump that got generated. So remember, this blue screen of death, if it is one, is called a memory dump. Why, do you ask? Well, because it dumps everything that's in the RAM. It doesn't know what the cheese is going on. It's getting some sort of error or corruption. So what it does is it just dumps everything in the RAM, restarts the PC, and starts fresh. So you can go and analyze that memory dump just to go and check if you can find anything useful in there. Maybe you can kind of figure out what was the problem that caused this to begin with. Alright, folks, moving you on to the last topic for this specific section, and then we'll move on to the last section, troubleshooting drive availability. So once again, we're talking about drives. This is not the first time. We have spoken about drives quite a lot in this module already, but here we go again. So something we don't want to hear, guys, is unusual noises. It's normal, mind you, to hear noises from hard drives, if we're talking about mechanical ones, that is. But if you start hearing new noises, unusual noises, especially if it's a lot of clicking, yeah, guys, that is not a sound you want to hear. We do not want to hear hard drives clicking, especially if it's a new clicking sound you're hearing. A clicking sound is normally a failing hard drive, guys. Now, folks, usually what happens is if your hard drive starts clicking, or it's the hard drive of your client that starts clicking, that hard drive is on its way out. It could be a matter of minutes, hours, days, weeks, or months. Usually it'll be about a day or less. So what's usually going to happen in that scenario is you might be able to still access this hard drive, but as soon as this machine gets turned off and you turn it back on, there's a very, very good chance that you will not be able to access this hard drive again. It's just going to keep clicking, 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 and it's not going to start. Now, sometimes you get lucky, quite a lot actually, where the drive might still actually open. You might be able to still access the data on it. It might last for another couple of days. It might last a couple of weeks even. I've had cases where the drive would last years after it started clicking. Years, but that's very rare. Usually, it will last only a day or less. So your number one priority, guys, is going to be to back up that drive. Even though you might still be able to access the data. Especially because you can still access the data. So your number one activity there is going to be to back up the data for yourself or the user. Because this drive is about to fail. And when this machine turns off, you're not going to be able to recover that data. Or there's a very good chance you're not going to be able to recover that data. Other things, folks, you guys can go and use to troubleshoot a drive availability is the light emitting diode status indicator. Something we did mention before in this module already. CompTIA is just repeating themselves a lot here. That's the little stupid light you'll see in the front of the case that's supposed to flicker if the hard drive is active. Like I said, I don't rely on that because it could be that the light is just not plugged in. It could be that it's blown, which is very unlikely. And a lot of cases these days, guys, don't even have that light. Laptops don't have it usually. Desktop PCs, all the new modern ones don't have it. So I don't know what they're talking about here. So if you see no LED activity, it could be a sign that you've got a faulty hard drive. But it could just be that the machine is idling. If you see constant LED activity, then you know, okay, well, the light is definitely working. If it's constant LED activity, it means your hard drive is very busy. So at least you know the light is working. And you know the hard drive is very busy. It's up to you to figure out why the hard drive is busy. It could be because there's an antivirus scan taking place. It could be because there's a huge copy to or from the hard drive. You never know. Or it could be something else that's causing the hard drive to be utilized a lot. It could just be the hard drive's faulty. If the hard drive's faulty, it might also show you a constant LED activity because it's constantly trying to recover, or it's constantly trying to read a certain file you're trying to open, and it's just unable to do it for some reason. Other things you folks might experience, guys, which is a very common thing, unfortunately, is missing drives in the operating system. Something we did speak about earlier. So if it's your main hard drive that's got your operating system installed, as you start the machine, you'll usually see some sort of black screen, and the message will be something along the lines of no boot device or no boot disk or drive detected or found. That is a bad error, guys. It means your main hard drive of your operating system has probably crashed and it's kicked the bucket. Now, when it comes to your secondary drives failing, should you be so lucky to have secondary hard drives, those you won't know until you actually go into your computer. So when you start exploring your PC and you want to go to your secondary or third hard drive, all you'll notice is, hey, where's my second hard drive? Hey, where's my third hard drive? So you'll just notice they're missing. And when you start investigating, you'll realize, oh, they failed. They kicked the bucket. It could be that they failed days ago and you just didn't access anything on them, so you didn't notice. That actually happened to me quite a few times where I had hard drives that failed days, weeks ago sometimes, but I just never accessed the stuff that's on there because it's, well, more of a storage location than anything else. And when the time comes when I need to access something on these drives, only then do I realize, oh, hang on a moment, it's not actually working. Other things, folks, that you might potentially experience, read and write failures. Could be for lots of reasons. It could be that this hard drive has maybe suffered some sort of shock in a sense of maybe it was dropped. It was dropped, something touched something that was not supposed to, because you're not supposed to drop hard drives, especially the old mechanical kinds that's got movable parts. If you drop those hard drives, guys, something will usually touch something inside that's not supposed to. It works with platters and discs. It works with lasers. It works with actuating arms and headers. It's got lots of moving parts inside is my point here. And when you shake it just a little rough, or you bump it a little rough, or you drop it, something is going to touch something that's not supposed to. Nothing is supposed to touch those platters. And when you drop it, the arm sometimes touches the platters. Not supposed to happen. When that happens, you can kiss the data goodbye. So, yeah, don't shake a hard drive, don't drop a hard drive, also don't bring them near magnets, by the way. And then, folks, the last thing I want to mention here under troubleshooting drive availability, what could also possibly cause this, which is very unlikely, is a blue screen of death. Blue screens of death, guys, is usually, in most cases, a memory-related error. So 9 out of 10 times, if you or a user experiences some sort of blue screen of death, it's got something to do with memory usually. Usually, your RAM. It's not limited to your RAM, but it's usually something to do with your RAM, 9 out of 10 times. If it's not your RAM, it might be your graphics card, because the graphics card's also got memory built into it, just in case you didn't know. It could be your hard drive that's causing this as well, because the hard drive has also got memory built into it. It's one giant storage location, and a part of your hard drive, guys, gets used as page file memory, or should I say virtual memory. Something that has been discussed and mentioned in this course before, guys. Alright guys, we have reached the end of the second main section, and we're about to move into the third and the last main section. Now before we move into that last main section, guys, this is the point where I play a bit of a game with you guys. So if you've watched my course up until now, you probably know what that game is. I normally give you a hidden word or a hidden phrase. It's completely optional if you want to play this, you don't have to. And if you get the word or the phrase, the idea is for you to go to the comment section down below and make a new creative sentence using the hidden word or the hidden phrase I've given you. Today's word is pizza. Let's see if you can be creative. Make a phrase or a sentence using the word pizza. Let's see how creative you guys can be. Now, you have to stick to YouTube's rules, guys. The whole idea behind this is just for giggles. So if anybody's just randomly reading through the comment section, you know, before they actually watch the video, they'll be very confused as to why are people talking so much about pizza. And I mean, they're watching an IT video for crying out loud, so they're going to be very confused. So it's a bit of an inside joke between me and you guys. Only people that actually watch the video up until this point will know what the heck is actually going on and why we're talking about pizza so much. Now, you are, of course, allowed to still go and ask your normal questions. If you want to ask anything else about this video or anything else for that matter, by all means, ask it down below and I'll gladly still get back to you. But as a little inside joke, just for giggles, if you want to have some fun, for those of you that's up for it, mention the word pizza down below. You can either mention it as is, but that's not fun. It's normally more fun to go and make a sentence using the word pizza, and then of course just stick to YouTube's rules and stuff. Alright folks, let's move on to the last main section of this video, system and display issues. Alright, first topic up here under this section, guys, troubleshooting component issues. Once again, we are going to see a little bit of an overlap of the previous section. So, first thing I want to mention is intermittent shutdown and application crashes. So, if you or the user have a machine and this machine just randomly, continuously keeps shutting down on you, or applications keep crashing, what could be the cause? If it's just one shutdown or one crash, that could be anything. But if you have repeated shutdowns and repeated application crashes, what could that be? Now, we're going to tackle this from both a software perspective as well as a hardware perspective. And once again, I'm just going to grab at random straws here of what's most likely going to be the culprit. I'm not saying this will be the culprit, guys. In reality, the list is much longer than what I'm going to list here. So coming at this first of all from a software cause perspective, this could be a compatibility thing. So if you or this user recently installed a new software, or you upgraded or downgraded the software, it could be that. Maybe it's a compatibility issue. Maybe that new version or that old version is not compatible with the operating system potentially that you're running. It could be a driver issue. And maybe that driver is just not very compatible with certain applications or certain games you're trying to run. It does happen where a certain driver won't necessarily give you issues if you're just idling the machine or doing your normal day-to-day work. But if you try to run a certain program or a certain game, then it might start showing its true colors where it's going to start causing application crashes and stuff like that. So, yeah, if it's an intermittent shutdown, guys, this could also potentially be malware. You never know. Maybe there's some sort of malware causing the machine to freak out. You never know. It could be a configuration. It could be a setting. Hardware-wise, guys, this could be something like overheating. Maybe this machine is overheating. So if a laptop or a desktop is overheating, that is one of the most common reasons why a machine will just randomly shut down on you, especially if it's repeatedly. So the machine shuts down on you, and immediately after shutting down, you notice it does not want to turn back on again. And if you wait, let's say 15, 20 or 30 minutes, and then randomly it is able to start again, and then after a couple of minutes it just shuts down on you again, that is normally a very big symptom for an overheating PC. It shuts down to prevent any damage. It's got sensors, just like a car's engine. It's got the same sensors. And if it senses the CPU is getting too hot, it cuts the power to the PC and it prevents you from starting the PC back up until the PC sensor senses that the temperature is no longer too excessive. Then it'll allow you to start the PC back up again. A car's engine does the same thing, guys. Not the old ones, but all the new modern engines these days. If you don't have antifreeze or some sort of coolant in your car to keep the engine from overheating, the sensor will detect the car keeps getting hotter and hotter, and at some point the sensor is going to cut the engine out to prevent any potential damage to the engine. In the old days, your engine would just overheat and you would have to buy yourself a new engine. Nowadays, luckily for us, I know it's very inconvenient, but luckily nonetheless, the engine will cut out, just like your PC, it will cut out to prevent any potential damage. It's a good thing. Other things that could potentially cause your PC to intermittently shut down on you, hardware-wise, it could be that it's drawing too much power. So maybe if it's idling, you might see it's fine. Doing some basic office work, it might be fine. And as soon as you start putting some load on it, opening a game or a program that draws a lot more power and a lot more resources, then it might start cutting out on you because the machine is now drawing more power to the point where this power supply you put in might not be able to cope with the load. Maybe it's too small to cope with the load. So you might need to go and consider getting yourself a bigger power supply potentially as well. Anyway, folks, so we did speak about something called overheating. So on the note of overheating and also potentially burning smells, definitely not something you want to smell on a PC, because a burning smell on a PC is a very expensive smell normally, guys. So make sure you clean the chassis, make sure you clean the heat sinks, and make sure you clean the fans. So when I say clean the chassis, I just normally mean, randomly all over the case. Just make sure there's no any dust or debris lying around. The heat sinks is those aluminium heat sinks, usually located, just beneath a fan or right next to a fan. Make sure those fins are clean and unobstructed by any dust particles. Otherwise, the air is not going to flow between the fins, which means it's not going to cool down properly. So make sure those heat sinks are cleaned properly. Make sure your fans are cleaned properly. The fans themselves, as well as the mesh in front or behind the fans as well, guys. If the fans or the mesh in front or behind the fans is blocked, yeah, air is not going to flow sufficiently and the fan's going to work a lot harder. You might find that the fan will run a lot faster than what's supposed to, or air is just not going to flow sufficiently. So you need to go and check that. Verify that you've got airflow. Verify that you've got sufficient airflow, guys. So make sure all your fans are running. Make sure they are blowing air in the right direction. It doesn't help you've got all these fans, but some of them are blowing in the wrong direction. So verify, confirm that they are blowing air in the right direction. The best way would normally be to have your fans in the front suck air in. So cool air would go in from the front. And the fans at the back would normally blow air out the back. Hot air out the back. Now, it's not uncommon these days, especially in gaming PCs, to have fans at the top of the case blowing air upwards. Why upwards? Because that's normally where your liquid cooling system would be, if you're so lucky. And since hot air goes up, it only makes sense to have the hot air blow up as well. If you have a very fancy gaming case, you might even have fans at the bottom of the case blowing cool air from the bottom up. And then, folks, physical damage. Something we haven't really touched on yet. There's always the odd chance that something might actually be physically damaged. It's unlikely, especially inside the case, unless you recently opened the case, recently installed, uninstalled, or changed something. But if you know for a fact you did not, and you know the user did not, then it's very unlikely it's going to be something that's physically damaged inside the case, unless of course somebody bumped the case over or something like that. So in terms of physical damage, if it is something inside the case, it could be bent pins. Most likely this will be a CPU pin. It could be other pins as well. But usually when we talk about bent pins, guys, that's the CPU pins. When somebody installed the CPU or changed the CPU. It could be cable or connector damage. So some sort of cable or connector that's supposed to plug in on the motherboard or into some sort of component maybe got damaged. If I have to shoot out of the hip here and guess what that would be, it's most likely going to be some sort of connector that's on the motherboard that's damaged. Those are a lot more fragile than other connectors. So the most fragile pins is probably going to be the CPU pins. And the most fragile connectors is going to be the ones on your motherboard. So those are the ones I would check first. Verify that your adapters and components are seated properly, guys. It could be that some RAM chip is just not plugged in properly. And just because it was doesn't mean it still is. It could be that it just shake loose. It does happen very rarely. But it does happen where RAM chips can actually shake loose, especially if you recently moved the machine or it recently fell on its side or something. Something I do see in some office environments. In some office environments, these cases are sometimes below someone's desk. And sometimes these people accidentally kick them over, and then as they fall over, something sometimes disconnects. It becomes loose. A cable falls out or gets partially loose. RAM chip gets loose. Graphics card gets loose. Something gets loose from the case falling over on its side. And if it's a mechanical hard drive, there's a chance the hard drive might actually crash even when the PC falls on its side. So you really don't want to have that happen. Lastly, folks, something we don't always have control over, unfortunately, is capacitor swelling. The good news is most new modern motherboards have minimal capacitors on them. They still have, but it's absolutely minimal compared to the old days. So these capacitors, as time goes by, especially if the motherboard starts getting old, they start swelling. And a swelling capacitor is a bad capacitor, guys. Things are gonna break if they have not broken already. You can also generally immediately see if a capacitor is swelling. So as soon as you start doing a visual inspection, it's definitely something that will be visually possible to spot. Right, folks, let's talk about troubleshooting you or the user's performance issues. Or should I say, the PC's performance issues. So once again, we are going to see some topics overlapping here, guys, like checking for overheating. So if a PC is slow or intermittently shuts down on you, like we said before, yes, it could be a symptom of overheating. But if the PC is also slow, that could be a symptom of overheating. It might not shut down on you, but if the PC is very hot, that can also cause a machine to, well, get slow. Machines, laptops, desktops, and servers, when they run very hot, they start underperforming and they start getting laggy and slow and things like that. So it's always a good idea to make sure your computer, your server, your laptop is properly cooled, guys. Overheating does make a machine slow. So on that note, make sure you've got no overheating. Make sure you've got no CPU throttling. So CPU throttling, there's lots of things we can go and configure on our machine that actually does CPU throttling. The most likely culprit here, guys, is your power settings in a sense of power saving mode. This is especially the case on laptop machines. Laptops have got a power saving mode, which is generally used for their batteries. So if this machine is running on battery power, obviously we would like to extend this battery life as long as we possibly can. Especially if you don't need high performance. In which case, you can go to your control panel, you can go to your power settings, and you can go and change this machine to power saving mode. There's 3 modes you can normally choose from. The first one is balanced or recommended. That's the one that most laptops are on. That means when it needs power, it'll take what it needs. That obviously does draw some power from the battery and it kills the battery. When it's just idling though, it'll only use what it needs and it's going to use minimal. So that really extends your battery life. It only takes what it needs when it needs it. That's the one that most machines are actually on. There's another option that says high performance, which means this laptop will run in high performance mode come what will, whether you need it or not. And then the third option is power saving mode. It will run in a reduced power phase mode, whether you're using it or not. And that massively extends your battery life, but less power means less performance. Means less heat as well, but it means massively less performance. So if you want more performance, you need more power. More power means more performance, but in turn it also equals more heat. With pretty much anything in life, more power always means more heat for some reason. So check for any misconfiguration, guys. There's a very good chance that the user might have changed something like the power settings I've just mentioned. So ask them, what has changed? So maybe, just maybe, they might mention something that they were not aware of that would have this effect. They might say, I just changed my power settings because I was on the go a lot, I was on the road a lot. And they might think nothing of it, but we know changing the power settings actually makes the machine very flippin' slow. So you can go and look into it, and you can go and change it back to another mode, recommended or high performance, and you'll see the problem's going to go away, guys. So, yeah, before we conclude this topic, verify the problem first, guys. Sometimes it's just a person's imagination, or it could just be a once-off. So verify the problem exists, and verify that it's still there. Maybe look at using some sort of diagnostic software to quantify performance loss. There's lots of things you can go and use, guys. You can go use Performance Monitor. And when I say Performance Monitor, I mean you can use the one in Task Manager, or you can use the actual Performance Monitor built into both client and server operating systems. You can maybe look at Resource Monitor. There's lots of tools you can go and use to go and check if there's actually some sort of loss in performance, guys. And while you're at it, guys, while you are doing all this troubleshooting and checking if there's actually a loss of performance, you might as well use that opportunity to identify opportunities for upgrade. Whether this be for yourself or for a client or a user, especially for a client or a user, because if you're making commission out of this, you definitely want to start identifying opportunities to upgrade the user or the client. So if you come to the conclusion, legitimately now, that maybe it's because the user just does not have enough RAM, and these new modern games and programs they're trying to run requires more RAM, well, then maybe suggest to the person, you know what, sir, you need more RAM. And if it's a matter of their motherboard does not support more RAM, then tell them, you know what, you need another motherboard, another CPU, and more RAM. So you might have an opportunity to go and sell this client some additional equipment, and you could make some commission on it. I'm not saying you should do this illegitimately. Look for legitimate opportunities, guys. Alright, moving on to troubleshooting inaccurate system date and time. Now, I kind of sort of accidentally gave the answer to this one earlier when we spoke about BIOS passwords, which I said is sometimes called a supervisor password and things like that. So if a user comes to you and they say, hey, I bought this new laptop or desktop, it's got a BIOS password on it, I would like to go and install a new copy of Windows, but I can't because I can't get into the BIOS, I can't change the boot sequence. What can be done about that, guys? You can go and remove that coin cell battery. If the coin cell battery is removed, that's your BIOS battery, by the way, it makes the BIOS forget things. It makes it forget that supervisor password, or as you guys might know it, the BIOS password. It makes the BIOS forget the boot sequence. Unfortunately, that's a bit of a schlep, so you might have to go and reconfigure that. But it also makes the BIOS forget, well, the date and the time. So since we know the coin cell battery is the culprit here in the sense of date and time, you know, that was a scenario where we on purposely made it forget the date and the time. If your PC starts forgetting the date and the time naturally, Don't you think it stands to reason that it might also be the coin cell battery? Yes, guys. So if it starts slowly but surely falling behind your machine, the client's machine, or a server, it's usually a sign of a coin cell battery that's flat. So today your machine might just be 1 minute behind, and then you go and correct the time. Tomorrow it's another minute behind, you go and correct the time again. And after a week or so now it's 2 minutes behind, so it starts falling behind over and over and more and more. That's symptoms that the battery is falling flat. It won't just boom stop working one day, but there will be symptoms that it's starting to fall flat. So what you can go and do is swap the battery. They cost almost nothing, but usually you'll find you don't even have to go and buy one. Most of us have an old motherboard lying around where the motherboards kick the bucket, and almost always do they have spare coin cell batteries on them that are still in working condition. You simply swap them out and voila, your problem will go away, guys. Now, in a sense of problems that are caused by inaccurate date and time, on your own machine it won't be too bad. I mean, it's still very inconvenient if you don't know what time it actually is. Maybe you're going to be late for a meeting. You thought the meeting was supposed to start at 4. You think it is 4. Meanwhile, it's not 4 o'clock. You've actually long since missed your meeting because the timer was behind. You might think you still have half an hour. Meanwhile, it's already 4 o'clock. That can be pretty inconvenient. It can be very unprofessional, and you might actually suffer some damages because of it. But in a company environment, guys, especially in a server environment, this can be dire if this battery is flat, especially on certain servers. One such server will be your domain controller. So everything in your company, all your servers normally synchronize with the domain controller. I had one company once, luckily this only happened to me once. One of my clients had a server room. This was a division of the government. And everything just crashed and started falling apart. And we initially thought this was malware because it pointed to malware. It looked like the symptoms of malware. We searched high, we searched low. We thought it was this, we thought it was that. We checked flipping everything. And eventually it turned out it was just a battery on the domain controller. Can you believe it? So the battery was flat, so it ever so slightly started falling behind with a couple of seconds. And if it's out by even just a couple of seconds, everything is out of sync. And if everything is out of sync server-wise, that can be dire in a server environment. So the stuff just started crashing. So you can absolutely not afford for that to happen in a server environment, guys. Make sure these batteries are top-notch in a server environment. Alright folks, let's move on to the last topic for this section and for today's video. Troubleshooting missing video issues. Now the word video, no pun intended there, that's just a coincidence. So when it comes to video just missing, this could be on your monitor, it could be on a projector, it can be on lots of things, guys. So the first thing you need to go and check is the physical cabling. It could be a cable issue for all we know. It could just be that the cables are not connected, one or more of them, so check the power cable. I know this might sound pretty obvious, but you'll be surprised. Sometimes somebody plugged the cable out and they did not inform you. Or sometimes it just wasn't plugged in properly to begin with, and you thought it was plugged in properly, or the person that plugged it in before you is the culprit, and now you just, well, you didn't think of checking it, because it looks like it's in. So go and check the power cable, check the actual video cable itself as well. Whether it be VGA, DVI, HDMI, DisplayPort, whatever you're using, check if the cable is plugged in properly on both ends. Check for any potential damaged connectors, especially of VGA and DVI. I know those are legacy cable connectors and whatnot, but they do work with pins, and sometimes these pins bend and they break, and we just don't realize it until we actually do an inspection visually. So go and check if there's not a connector that's potentially damaged. Go check the cable. Maybe the cable is damaged, especially in office environments where people have got wheelie chairs. I cannot tell you how often I've seen people break network cables and video cables because they've got wheelie chairs that they constantly go and use, that they go over this cable back and forth on. It really messes up those cables properly good. Go and check the cable performance. It could be that maybe you're just using the wrong cable. And what I mean by that is, if you, for example, use an HDMI cable, did you know you get them in different speeds, different frequencies and stuff like that? So make sure you're using the right one. Just because it fits, guys, does not necessarily mean it's the correct one. It's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. So you need to make sure you're using the right HDMI cable. I've seen so many people moan and groan that, hey, I'm plugging an HDMI into my laptop, my desktop, but if I plug it into my TV the other end, just nothing happens. And it's not always the case of it's your PC that's the problem. It's not always the case that it's the TV that's the problem. It is sometimes the cable. If you use that cable on another screen, it might work. And if you use it on your TV, it might not work, which leads you to believe it might be the TV. Meanwhile, it's the cable, guys. What it could also potentially be, guys, if we're looking at this from a projector perspective, it might be a burnt out bulb. I personally find this one to be unlikely. The reason I'm saying that is because of most projectors these days, months before the bulb starts blowing out, it'll start informing you that the bulb needs to be replaced. So as you start turning the projector on, normally that first 5 minutes or so, it'll tell you the bulb needs to be replaced. You'll start seeing the image is going to look a little blurry, a little fuzzy. It's going to display for 2 or 5 minutes a message that says you need to go and get another bulb. So it's going to start telling you to go and replace this bulb. So if it does eventually blow, then you would know, okay, you know what, boys? I think it's the bulb because for the last 2 months, this thing has been telling me to change the bulb. And today I just can't see anything on it, or now it's just completely dead. Then you might know, okay, you know what? I think it might be the bulb, if we're talking about a projector. Something else is intermittent projector shutdowns, since we're talking about projectors. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have seen or heard, but projectors, guys, they've got fans. It's got a little light there. That thing generates a lot of heat. It's got a fan inside that projector, cooling it down just like a computer. And just like a computer, that fan and those vents can get clogged. What do you think is going to happen when the fan and the vents gets clogged? Which is going to happen eventually, guys. It's going to get hot. It's not going to be able to cool itself down sufficiently anymore like it did in the beginning. And when it gets too hot, just like a computer, just like a car's engine, it's going to shut down automatically to prevent any potential damage. So if you have yourself a projector that just randomly shuts down on you, yeah, it's either a timer or it's getting too hot. The more likely culprit is it's probably getting too hot. Alright, folks, there you have it. That is the end of Module 4. Please stay tuned for Module 5. And please remember, guys, at the end of this course, and, well, the end of this playlist, same thing, there will be practice questions. Custom practice questions which are based on the objectives of the exam to test your knowledge on what you've learned here. And if you want more practical-based questions, you can normally find that on my Patreon. So go check out my Patreon link, which is in the video description down below. There you'll find more practical-based questions and all kinds of other extra material on my Patreon, which you would otherwise not find on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. That'll be in the end of this playlist. But what I might do is I might actually start releasing some of those practice questions before I actually even finish this course, just to help those guys that actually have the knowledge already that just want to go and test themselves. It's not fair those guys wait for the whole course to finish, and then I could have actually just released those practice questions. So I'll probably start releasing some of those questions before the course actually even finishes. That'll always stay at the end of the playlist, folks. So just keep an eye out for that, guys. Right, folks, before we conclude this video, a short, quick thank you to all the sponsors and the supporters of this channel. Thank you very much, guys, for making those donations. If you would like to sponsor me or support me, you can find that in the video description down below. So you can make a donation if you want to, PayPal-wise. You can buy me a coffee or a milkshake. Or alternatively, you can become a Patreon. We will not just support me, but you can actually get access to additional material, guys. So thank you to all the PayPal sponsors, guys. Thank you very much to all my Patreon sponsors. Unfortunately, I don't have all their names listed here because a lot of them decide to stay anonymous. But for the ones that do have their names displayed here, guys, thank you very much. Also, thank you to all the anonymous Patreons. You guys know who you are. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate your support. And then lastly, guys, in case you didn't hear me say it before, the channel does have a Discord server, by the way. You can find that link also in the video description. It's the very last link in the video description, all the way at the bottom. So the last time I checked, it was well over 2,000 people that was in there, almost about 3,000 people. By the time you guys join, it might even be way more than that. So it's people like myself that's in there, IT trainers, people studying A+, people studying N+, Security+, and lots of other courses. So if you need assistance and you want to ask for help, if you want to ask for guidance, if you want to be in a study group, or if you just want to help other people, that is the place to go and do it, guys. Alright, folks, I will see you in Module 5 of the CompTIA A+ 1200 series.